Hello, folks, and welcome into HuPAC Talk, where today you find me dressed in black to commemorate the passing of what was once a very promising season for the pack. Um, I haven't recorded in a while, as you're well aware. I've been busy. I was planning on doing an NFL recap episode of sorts, perhaps a playoff forecast episode here this week, but frankly, after what transpired in Denver on Sunday afternoon, I don't really have the wherewithal to get through an episode covering the entire NFL. So instead, I thought I would do what is usually the best thing to do in situations of this sort, and take this episode to the kitchen and get some consolation. So that's where we're going to head here in a bit, and looking forward to seeing you there. So for today's consolation, I'm going to be making chocolate chip cookies. I found that consolation cookies are just invaluable whenever I'm dealing with some kind of trouble or sorrow in my life. And I really couldn't recommend them enough for anyone dealing with a tough breakup or maybe the death of a loved one or the Micah Parsons injury. They're really the gift that keeps on giving back, and I don't have enough good things to say about them. This is the same recipe I used back in June when I was maybe a little under the influence. So with that in mind, let's just get going. So for starters, we're going to whisk together our dry ingredients, which in this case is just flour and a half teaspoon of baking soda. Can't really see the baking soda getting dispersed, so just go until you've intuited that you've got it mixed thoroughly. Okay, now we're going to add about 10 tablespoons of butter to a saucepan over medium-high heat. We're just going to brown that. Really adds a nice flavor dimension to our dish. While that gets started, I'm going to add about 3/4 cup of chopped walnuts to a pan over low heat to toast. If you're allergic to tree nuts, then don't add walnuts or pecans to these cookies because they'll kill you, potentially. What you can do instead, though, especially at this time of year, is add something seasonal, like chopped Andes mince, for instance. Okay, once it's melted, your butter is going to start sputtering, and you're just going to want to swirl it gently just to maintain a nice even heat distribution while it starts to brown. All right, as you can see, we've got some nice browning occurring, so we're going to go ahead and transfer this to a bowl. Okay, so we've got our hot brown butter. We're going to go ahead and add 4 tablespoons of cold butter and then whisk it in until it's completely melted. Okay, now we'll add a couple teaspoons, I should say, of vanilla, a dash of salt, half a cup of granulated sugar, and 3/4 cup of dark brown sugar. We're just going to whisk that all up together. At this point, I heartily recommend giving your mixture a sniff because that is one of the most rewarding parts of this whole experience. Okay, now you're going to add 1 whole egg and an additional yolk to your mixture, and then whisk it for 30 seconds until there's no lumps left. At this point, you can let your mixture sit for about 3 minutes, and then you're going to repeat the whisking 3 times, sandwich around 2 times of resting once again for 3 minutes. So after about 10 minutes, you'll be ready to proceed to the next significant step. While that's resting, I'm going to go ahead and take these off the burner. Once you can smell them, they should be done. Okay, once you're finished, we can now add your flour and baking soda mixture. Go ahead and stir that in with a spatula. At this point, you can go ahead and mix in your 3/4 cup of chopped walnuts. Okay, now you can go ahead and add your chocolate chips. The amount of chocolate chips you add is ultimately proportional to the amount of suffering you're dealing with. For this instance, I would recommend about 1.25 cups. I'm going to go ahead and give this a final stir. And voila, our dough is ready to be shaped and baked. You're going to want to line your baking sheets with parchment paper. And then these are going to be pretty big cookies, so we're going to be doing about 2 to 3 tablespoons per ball. All right, once your cookies are all done being rolled out, you can go ahead and throw them in the oven at 375 degrees for about 12 minutes, rotating halfway through baking. This recipe makes enough to fill out 2 cookie sheets, but we're just going to do one at a time so that all of the cookies bake the same. So while that batch is baking, I'm going to go ahead and roll out this last sheet of cookies. You know, and I was just thinking that the Packers had Super Bowl aspirations prior to acquiring Parsons back in August. So with his departure for the rest of the season, I don't think it's completely unreasonable to maybe retain some of the high hopes we had prior to his injury, just because there's still a lot of talent on this team. And yeah, I think the defense will take a step back, but I don't think it's completely unreasonable to expect them maybe to start taking the ball away more. They showed that last year without Parsons, they were still able to generate a lot of turnovers. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just being irrational, but I see maybe a path forward to some success. When you look back to 2010, the last time they were in a Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl they won, the Packers dealt with a slew of injuries down the stretch that, in the eyes of many sports pundits, kind of rendered them not a threat to winning the Super Bowl. But they kind of defied the odds behind some stellar play from their quarterback. And really, that's what it's going to take, right? The Packers are going to need Love to really take his play to the next level. But I don't think it's completely unreasonable given his success in recent years, especially at this juncture in the season where, you know, people will say it's Toyotathon, but I don't know if it's Toyotathon or just the fact that he tends to play better when the stakes are higher late in the season. So even though he didn't have a phenomenal game in Denver, I think a lot of that really comes down to the shock factor, because the whole team really was playing phenomenally up until the interception and then Parsons' injury early on in the third quarter. They had a 9-point lead. You know, things were going pretty well. Then all of a sudden it just went to hell really pretty abruptly after the Parsons injury, and the offense just wasn't able to get it going. And I don't think that's because of some structural, you know, defect or something that Denver was doing differently on defense. I think it was purely mental, purely psychological. And that's why I'm holding out hope for this Packers team to regroup, get their shit together, and maybe make a push here before the end of the season. Maybe even win the division, because that would give you a 2 seed in the NFC playoffs. And all of a sudden you're staring at a game at Lambeau, potentially 2 games at Lambeau, before going on the road to a place maybe like LA or potentially Seattle. So I think there's still hope. Maybe it's just the cookies talking. Maybe I'm just being irrational. But I do think there's hope. And yeah, we just got to wait and see. All right, just pulled these bad boys out of the oven. And while they cool, and before I try them, I just want to point out some really phenomenal textural appearance here. We got this nice kind of craggy appearance, this cracking going on up here and really all around the sheet. You'll notice they're probably a little darker than your typical chocolate chip cookie. That just comes from using the dark brown sugar and the brown butter. Really gives them this kind of added caramel dimension to their flavor and appearance. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. That's incredible. My gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm healed. Go Pack, go baby.